not only have you got to solve the right problem, you've got to prioritize. And I think the other real challenge is that while you are picking the right problem and prioritizing, you've got to have a really good view across the piece. And this is something that's sometimes that is challenging for organizations to do, is to look out to that horizon. What is coming over the hill, right? And beyond the right now, beyond the things that are causing pain, you've got to have people who can see what's next. And that's actually, in many ways, is the most fun part of my job.
When you are an organization that handles trillions of transactions every year and touch the lives of nearly every resident in the United Kingdom, it would be easy to rest on your laurels. But the payments world is changing rapidly, and Pay.UK has committed to not only keeping up, but moving ahead of the global competitors. Daniel Jonas joins us to talk about the journey they have ahead of them, the impact on end users, and the innovative modelling program they are embarking on to mitigate risk and give their customers and end users the best possible payments experience as they reinvent the dominant payments platform in the United Kingdom. Daniel is Head of Research and Innovation at Pay.UK, leading a team to deliver their Deep Insights program. He has a distinguished career driving innovation in a wide variety of industries where systemic problems create the need for true leadership and innovation to effect real, positive change. Well, Daniel Jonas, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on podcasts. Well, you have got quite a history. You are doing some really, really interesting stuff. And the first thing that I really love for people to do as guests on the show is give us that 2-minute, 5-minute life story. But firstly, welcome.
Hi, it's very nice to be here.
Excellent. So tell me a little about your journey to get to where you are today.
Well, I guess it's a funny thing. There is no career path for the sort of thing I do. It's not like you wake up and you sort of leave university and go, I want to go and innovate in this sector or that sector. People are very lucky if they have that kind of clarity of vision that early in life, and it's not where I'm coming from. I've done a number of things in my life, and I've been in finance, I've been in IT, I've been in consulting. So I've been in a lot of different industries, and that's not something that happens to a lot of other people. People tend to go up in one industry, and so right now I'm in payments. And it's a fascinating industry, but I've worked in other parts of financial services. I've worked in healthcare. I've worked in fast-moving consumer goods, in insurance, and in engineering, in transport, and in recruitment. And what I've discovered looking back over the years is that the thing that's a constant in everything I've done is I've gone into industries that were really quite established and tried to change them in some way. So this has been most successful when the industries have gone, do you know what, this is difficult, we're in a difficult place. The rules that we've run things by for a really long time, decades, even centuries sometimes, they're just not working for us anymore. And or somebody's disrupting from the outside, or for one reason or other, there is a mandate to change. There is a burning platform, and usually at some point in that curve is when I arrive, and I try and do something, at least maybe if not like earth-shattering in significance. I like to do something that will at least change one thing for that industry at a level that I know that something is different as a result.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
I guess, it might sound a little bit grandiose, but it's amazing what small things can make changes. These kind of, and no one is no one is a sort of seismic shifter of industries. It takes a whole load of people to do a lot of different things for there to be a tipping point, for there to be a sea change. All of these things, they are very collective, but you've got to sort of catch that sort of zeitgeist in the industry and move things in the direction which the wind is blowing. And I guess that's one of the things that I spend time doing. I work out which way the wind is blowing and which way the wind is likely to blow for a good long time. Sometimes that leads to flights of premature genius where I get things completely wrong, but I get things effectively right, except 10 years too early or something useless like that. But it's usually quite fun when I look back and go,
I was ahead of my time.
Yes, indeed.
So, I mean, the overarching theme there is you're always seeming to come in where there are big, hairy problems in very well-established businesses and industries and trying to really sort of fast-track and identify how we can innovate to keep up with the changing world. So I suppose a great segue into what you're doing now. Tell us about some of these challenges with this, mature industry and how you're going about some of that, I suppose, change management and innovation.
Well, I guess so. Payments is a funny one because payments has been around as long as humans have been around, I guess. And in fact, one of the things about working for Pay.UK is we're effectively working on payment systems that have been around for decades. In fact, our oldest payment system is hundreds of years old. It's the checks system, and we oversaw the transforming of that into a scan and away from paper and into character recognition, which you'll get in your open banking app. But that's the sort of level of change that you see. And payments is also a really funny industry because because there's so much legacy in it. There's so much sort of heritage and actually what I would say is there's so much craft wisdom. There is a reason that many things are the way they are, and you tamper with those at your peril. And I found the same thing when I was in rail. There you're dealing with sometimes with assets that have 100 years life on them and 100 years more life in them. And you're looking at you're making investment decisions based on the priorities of sometimes of organizations that are thinking only ahead to the next funding round, or to the people within them.
And there aren't necessarily the geographic constraints that there were historically. Now it's such a globally diverse marketplace, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's where the real changes come from. I mean, originally, if you think about us, we were brought together a few years ago as the result of an industry decision to group several schemes under the same banner, and to optimize with the aim of building the future platform for the industry, which indeed we're sort of we're moving down the road towards. So in addition to what's being sort of mandated within the industry, there's also huge changes coming through with the advent of open banking, particularly the advent of some really seismic new technologies, some of which we don't really understand yet, and some of which people think they understand but don't, and some of which may be seismic and some of which may not be. And at the same time, there's a whole bunch of people looking at payments from the outside and going, do you know what? There's a better way to do this, right? We don't see why we have to abide by these rules that maybe only benefit the established players. And some of the people that are eyeing that up are either people who are like us from around the world, people who have been long established players that are also worried about the same things that we're worried about, or they're people who are so big by their nature and do so much e-commerce that payments is a huge source of interest to them. and these are household names with very deep pockets and global reach in many cases.
Yeah. So one of the things you were talking about earlier off here was in the wake of Brexit, facing rising populism in the US, Europe, and Asia, as well as like global turmoil of the pandemic. Governments are looking to bolster the trust of citizens and the confidence of consumers. So how's that played out in that either that mandate to you or the philosophy behind what you're trying to achieve with Pay.UK?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things in the nature of the payments industry is about the scale of some of the players. I mean, you have the card networks who are enormous international beasts, and with deep pockets, huge technology resources, and superb thinking. And you have the internet giants, even more so. And actually in a position to take on the card networks, and then you have people like us. There's 250 of us, and we serve most of the vast majority of the people in the United Kingdom. Touch us in one way or another. Their salary moves because of us, their pensions, their benefits. A large part of their payments when they settle up for things, the retail payments of the United Kingdom, that goes through us. I think I saw something like 85% of a given type of retail payment goes through our platforms, through BACS, through faster payments, through checks, through things like the current account switching service, and through the many other things that we're involved in. And the thing that's really interesting about it is that we have this sense of importance within the system as somebody who keeps the system stable. We have a sense of national mission. One of the things I first found about the difference between payment, actually this big similarity between payments and the railway, is that you've got a thing moving from one end to the other, right? It's got to arrive on time. Nothing's got to go wrong with it. At scale, there are enormous amounts of complexity, and if anything goes wrong with it, people are going to notice really, really fast, and it's going to end up in the papers. Now that makes us a systemic player, right, and a systemic risk manager. If it were, and it's almost never that anything happens that anybody would notice, right? Because you'd hear about it. When the chips are down, it's us that people count on, and it's our job to make sure the chips stay up. So that gives us a very different attitude from somebody that can basically take their business elsewhere. Really good example of this. There was the big fight between Amazon and Visa just before Christmas, where Visa were looking at the post-Brexit interchange field and looking to sort of maybe move their sort of charges about a bit and to flex some of their muscle. And Amazon looked at that and they said, we're not having that. Actually, we don't see why at our scale that makes some difference to us commercially. And so what we're going to do is make a move to just, we'll go another way. We can cut Visa out of the picture in some way. And there are very few other people who can do that. They did that, and they did it, moreover, without, in fact, necessarily communicating it that widely in advance. And it inconvenienced quite a lot of people. There's a lot of panic. There's a lot of headlines, and Visa basically, as far as I could see, gave way on that one. And there's not that many people that could do that. And it was a fairly, minor commercial sort of negotiation problem. But when you see the effect that something like that happens, you see that there's a difference between going, well, we haven't got Visa, we'll go via MasterCard instead. Right, there were options, right? Whereas some of the stuff that we do there's not necessarily other options at this point, and that makes our mission very different. Also, in terms of the way that we're regulated, we have two regulators, one of which is FMID, Bank of England, and our job is to make sure that the risk in the system stays where it needs to be. Right, and that risk is effectively managed at a system level. We look at where there's concentration in that risk. We are looking at all the ways in which the system as a whole can be affected in a way that people would notice, and that includes things like whether people have access to everything that they need. You'll there are certain systems that are deemed to be absolutely key to the national life, and we're part of that. That's what it means to be critical national infrastructure, like water or electricity.
And when you have such a material impact on the end customer, which aren't necessarily your customers, they're your customers' customers, one could argue that you've got an obligation to take those customers into consideration with the actions that you're taking.
Yeah, and that's a huge shift in terms of the structure of where we've come from, where our customers are typically banks and payment service providers that connect directly to our systems, and their customers, like you say, are what we would call end users. They are sort of people like yourself, myself, using payments. There are organizations paying their staff and paying invoices, all of that sort of all of those parts. But historically, we've not had much sight of that because those were not our customers; those were our customers' customers. But one of the major shifts that we've gone through is thinking, well, you know what? How can we best, if we can best serve the end users if we understand them, and if we get to a point where we understand that if we understand what's good for our customer's customer, we help our customer.
Yes.
And that gives us another real sense of mission. I'll give you a really good example of that. We just carried out a piece of research on small to medium enterprises, SMEs. So I think that's sort of 10 to 250 size, 10 to 250 size organizations. And they have particular things that they are concerned about in terms of payments. They're not sitting there with a massive treasury department, sort of like scanning for new systems. They're running their day-to-day business. We are talking to people like surf shops, right, and saying, how do people pay for things? These are sometimes pub conversations. I was in the pub not a couple of weeks ago with somebody who's a specialist in Harley Street, and who runs effectively a small business. And she was saying to me that she has to offer for her the big thing is giving the customer absolutely every possible option to get the money in. But what we found is that the main is the thing that really bothers small businesses like that is then reconciling it afterwards. There's a lot of payments, some of them quite small, and there's a lot of payment systems. And what sometimes people have real trouble with is having the systems in place to reconcile one payment with another payment, with a set of payments, and scale that up to get a whole business picture. And these guys do not want to spend lots of time reconciling payments, right? There may be systems that can do this for them, but they don't have time to look into them. So there's insights there for people like the big accounting providers. There's insights there for people like business banking customers who are working with those small business system providers. These are things that we can start to tell people, and then they can do something on that basis. Then what we would make sure that we could do is to ensure that our systems support the functionality that they are going to come asking for.
Yeah.
We're not, deciding how they should compete. That's not our job. Our job is to make sure that they can innovate, that they can compete to provide a better set of solutions for that whole market.
Yeah, as somebody that's done a lot of work in that small to medium space, it is so clear that more often than not, it's in the case of they don't know what they don't know. And they are so busy just keeping their businesses running and afloat and dealing with the day-to-day that they don't necessarily have the time, the effort, or the inclination to look at something different. It's not necessarily a case of how can I do it better, how can I make it easier? It's how do I stay afloat?
Yes.
So what did that look like in regards to how you went about that process? And I also understand that you were doing some really interesting stuff with modeling.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the other things about understanding. It's about understanding that big picture. I mean, I've talked about our sort of out of place in the system and what happens in terms of sort of national importance. So one of the things that we need to do is we need to look at an awfully wide set of things that can affect payments, because payments affects everything, and everything affects payments. So what we really need to see is not only do we need to understand technology developments and developments in industries and developments at an economic level and at an international level, but we also have to be able to understand the effects of those things. Now, most people would think about this and go, well, this is about economic models and how economics affect things. But even as we can see from the sort of like arguments that have gone on this week about a drop in productivity post-pandemic, economists are all arguing hugely about this. And now I have my own sort of views about maybe why they might be arguing about this so much. But one of the things that I really believe in is in testing hypotheses, making the hypotheses about what's going on and then being able to test them. This is one of the things I did in the recruitment industry. I ran a Turing test about how on whether a machine could fit a CV to a job description faster than a human. And guess what? Actually, if the machine was well enough trained and knew what the human was looking for, right, it could do it 13,000 times as fast. Now, that didn't make the human redundant, not remotely. The human was still doing a whole bunch of other really important things. But what we were able to do was to show the bits or what the exact effect of something was on the end-to-end process. And one of the things that I seek to do here at Pay.UK is to move us onto a similar basis with how we understand payments. So we've invested in agent-based modeling techniques, and this was originally something that we did within the current account switching service. It was very successful. Was able to predict the direction of the market and the effect of various things. And what we've done is we've widened this model so that it covers the entire spectrum of payment product selection and usage. So what we would do, and this is and the fun thing is this. You guys are from New Zealand, so you'll know all about this sort of thing. We create, millions of little agents, little sort of artificial models of how humans and organizations act, and we program how they behave, and then we then we set them off and give them conditions to react to it and see what they do. And this is so what you get is you can see swarming, you can see crowd behaviors, you can see quite unexpected systemic outcomes happen when something big affects the system, and you're not necessarily able to predict what those things are in advance. What you also want to know is whether a change that is happening is going to keep the system in stability or not, or whether it's going to disrupt it. And this is no different from the effect from the way in which people model crowd scenes in movies, like the Weta Workshop does in New Zealand, and for things like Lord of the Rings. That's agent-based modeling. and it's really exciting. There's not that many industries that do it in this kind of detail, and I am hoping that when we've got this properly up and running, that it's going to be something unique.
Give us an indication of scale of just how many of these agents you believe that you're going to get this to. So I know that obviously the bigger the scale, the more data you got, and the more data you've got, the more confidence you're going to have.
The number of agents is as the number of people who are active in selecting and using payment products, and for the UK that's about 50 million. And so you can see that actually the way that you've got to do that is in a very different way. So yes, the number of agents that we've got is about 50 million, and they have hundreds of parameters which influence what they do. These are not just, we had a very sort of quick and dirty model that we started off with just to test some of the principles based on 9 economic factors. And that's, that is complicated enough. There's nine potentially really quite volatile factors which affect people's economic circumstances, which affect how much spare money they have, which affect their sort of the sort of things that they buy and their buying patterns. And if you then go from beyond the purely monetary factors and the purely economic factors, I mean, people do not look at the GDP measurement before they start to pay, but they will look at the price of their of building materials before they decide whether to embark upon a renovation project. If they've got a credit card bill, they will start. They may pay it in a different way. If they may start to pay for things or in installments in order to defer payment where they previously didn't happen. And as you can imagine, at scale, that means a very different set of behaviors are going to emerge, which can, again, at scale, affect the entire system. Now, we know about this in the system. This has been known for a long time, but the question is, can you model it? I mean, right now, the regulators are looking at buy now, pay later, which is one of the most exciting things in the payments industry right now. Everyone's rushing towards it, investing in it, buying those companies up left, right, and center. Everyone wants a piece. The people like the Klarnas of the world are defining themselves against the card networks, saying, "Oh no, it's much better credit." And at the same time, people are looking around, going, "Well, hang on a minute, so there isn't a credit check, and isn't this just payday loans all over again?" So there's there's a real sense of ferment around that. So for us, we need to look at that and go, what actual behaviors is this going to drive? What's actually going to happen? How is this? Let's say, for example, that people, instead of making one payment, are making 4 payments over different periods, right? That starts to be a very different sort of thing at scale for the payment systems that we operate.
Mm-hmm. And what are you hoping to get out of it in regards to the information that's going to have a material impact on the decisions that you make? Because the decisions you make are going to have a material impact on your customers and the end users. And I've got another one that I've got in the back pocket in thinking about that, which comes down to those end users. But I'd be really keen to get those insights in regards to that end objective of doing this modeling. How's it going to impact those decisions that you make?
Well, when we get this to the place that we want it to be, we should be able to use it to drive our decision making in the right sort of way. So we will have the hypotheses. We'll be able to have the right level of confidence in the hypotheses, and actually that would be able to drive decisions as to where we need capacity and allocate resources more effectively. We'll be more efficient as an organization, and we'll actually be more resilient. And that really is the key for us, to become more robust and more resilient, and to make sure that people have the sort of confidence that they have a right to expect from us.
I would imagine it'd play a major role in the future looking forward as well, of the type of communication and education you can provide to your customers around the changes that are coming and the reasoning why, and it's going to help empower them to make better decisions as well.
Yeah, that's an absolutely excellent point. They would, I mean, we would ideally want to be in a place where people are thinking about how the impact of their commercial decisions are on their payment systems, and thinking about the consequences further down the road after they've rushed into the market and made the decisions that they've made.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And what's next for you when it comes to this whole project and the rollout of it? And I'm not expecting timelines and things like that, but it must be a really fascinating stage for you to be in, just sort of kicking this off.
Yeah. Well, the like any sort of form of modeling, there's a well-known saying that all models are wrong, but some are useful. We're trying to get it to the point where it is correct enough to give us the right level of confidence.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. A little bit like getting back to the economists, sort of probably the most accurate prediction that most economists make is that most of their predictions are not going to be accurate. Indeed,
yeah. But again, part of this is you know it when you say it. You know, we've had in terms of the actual, in theory, how everything ought to work in reality. You know, we went through a process of independent verification and validation. We worked with a sort of very eminent university department on this. They checked our maths, right? And they said, well, according to our understanding of how these things work and according to the maths, it's been done correctly. So now the question is whether all of these correct parameterizations, when they've been done, all of them collectively then produce realistic results. So that's it's just a really exciting thing to be able to talk about. I'll be even more excited when I could show some results.
I can't wait for the next update and we see where it's at. And so I suppose circling all the way back around, a lot of people would say, well, you touch nearly every single person in the UK in some shape or form. Why bother?
Why bother to change? Well, you know, payments is globally competitive now, right? Like I said at the beginning, there are increasing numbers of players in the market. The players are increasingly diverse. We are not able to sort of sit here and go, well, we've always existed as a national payment platform. We should rely on national protection, etc., etc. We haven't previously maybe thought of ourselves as a company with competitors, but even though we've got a hugely strong position domestically, this doesn't necessarily translate into a unique long-term advantage in the face of like new, better funded global infrastructures. I mean, if there are alternative models emerging for payments, we need to earn our right of preference, right? We need to, we need to be a place where people see us as a good option, an option of choice. I mean, right down to this sort of SME conversation which we had earlier. When my garage are very kind enough to come and drop my car back when they're done with it, right? And they come to the door with a payment device. And in the old days, this would be a card PDQ, and nowadays it's a much smaller Bluetooth device. But the thing that hasn't changed for them is they're still paying some pretty hefty prices for those payments, and that stacks up over time when you're a small business. And when I say to them, would you rather get a payment from a bank account right, from an interbank payment, they invariably say yes. Not just my garage, but every small merchant that I talk to, they said, yeah, of course we would, but can we? Now, in other countries, they can, right? The UK runs very much, has a huge amount of commitment has a huge amount of card volume, of course. There are other countries where it's not like that. People pay differently. Those systemic changes are possible, but only if we compete, right? Only if we are able to offer those options for people to innovate on our platforms and offer the ability to, for example, pay by bank, as some people are already starting to do and think about, and there are propositions emerging for that. And for that, we have to ensure that they want to come and innovate with us. They have to want to spend their time, their R&D time and money going, well, Pay.UK's platform is really good, it's really flexible, it's really open. Yeah. People, we've got to earn that right. And we don't just automatically get given it. I've been in a startup myself, right? And the thing that you want to do is you either want to sell product, right, or you want to build product. Anything other than selling product and building product, and those relationships and that investment in your platform is time that you do not want to spend. It's grudge time, right? So if we are hard to work with, people won't work with us because it's going to be too much like hard work, too difficult, and other people will make it difficult. And that's the real shift that we've got to make from being somebody who exists because we exist and people know we exist and rely on us, to being people that not only exist but people see us as somebody that's really attractive to work with. There are other countries where that's happened, right? There are people that have been forced to do this by their governments, right? There are countries with very different payment behaviors where it's been much easier to shift volumes over into the interbank rails.
Well, I think it's absolutely admirable what you are doing, because it is very easy to sit in a place of complacency. And that complacency is a very dangerous place to be in this modern world that has no borders when it comes to technology, and it can be a very, very rapid fall. So I think to start winding things up, I think that's a great place to really acknowledge that for such an integral piece of infrastructure that is, let's go back to the rail network. Potentially unwieldy in the first instance, it's a massive undertaking to really change those rails. And I think it's going to be a fascinating ride watching the change as you go through it.
You're absolutely right. And there's so many other things happening around which affect that. Everyone's going to be affected by our new platform, by the new payments architecture. It's a really significant undertaking. It's in many ways it's the key product. This is our cross rail, right? Or our pick the infrastructure product, which is our offshore wind farms, whatever you're looking at.
And from a company that specializes in helping businesses make really good data-driven decisions, it's exciting for us to see you take this modeling approach where you are going to be having millions, if not billions, of data points all feeding in to help you make those decisions and communicate better to your customers and the end users. And I think it's going to be an absolutely fascinating ride, and I cannot wait to check in with you in the not too distant future and see how it's all going.
Fantastic.
Yes. So thanks again for joining us on podcast. We will put all of your key contact details in regards to your social handles and things like that in the show notes. But I suppose just finish off from your side of things, is there anything that you would like to add or any suggestions that you would really like to impart on the listeners around if you are going to embark on a project to solve a big problem? What are some of the things you look for when you first encounter a problem?
So what I look at is the system.
Mm-hmm.
I need to understand the stakeholders. I need to understand the politics, the priorities, who the players are, who can make things happen, who can where the power to make those decisions ultimately rests. Right? You've then got to look at the requirements of that change. What are people asking for? Is it realistic? Is it sensible? What is the purpose of that change? What are we trying to do here? You can't, one of the things for us is that we are not trying to solve every problem that there is. We can only solve the problems that are important for us. Right now, for example, we are hugely focused on that front end. We are focused on fraud. Fraud has hugely spiked within the pandemic. That's a top priority for us. So we're on a sort of vast. We've got a huge set of things that we're doing to try and address that. Right. But so you've got to, not only have you got to solve the right problem, you've got to prioritize. And I think the other real challenge is that while you are picking the right problem and prioritizing, you've got to have a really good view across the piece. And this is something that's sometimes that is challenging for organizations to do, is to look out to that horizon. What is coming over the hill, right? And beyond the right now, beyond the things that are causing pain, you've got to have people who can see what's next. And that's actually, in many ways, is the most fun part of my job, because that's the bit that I have to spend a lot of time going, well, you know what? There's a bunch of things coming, right? And they're not here now. But if you wait until they're here, I've often said to people, an innovation emergency is something you didn't spot 3 years ago, and it's too late.
I love it. Well, Daniel, Jonas, you are a humble genius, and really appreciate you coming on to the show. Look forward to those further updates and getting you back on where you can really give us some insights in and around, especially that modelling project and what it's telling you. So thank you once again. We'll look forward to having you on again soon, and have a great day, my friend.
Thank you. It's been great to be here.
Thanks for listening into this episode, which is made possible by the team at touchpointgroup.com, the customer intelligence company you can partner with to rapidly translate your customer feedback data into actionable insights that will enable you to prioritize actions that make a demonstrable difference. You'll find a link to their website in the show notes. Thanks again. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and see you soon.